Hi there and welcome. So I'm live and I'm going to be watching BBC Question Time live, hopefully joined by some of you. Do put your questions in the chat. So without further ado, let's just make sure I can work out how to do this. Here we go.
From Darren Jones recently as number 2 in the Treasury in Keir Starmer's latest reshuffle. For the Conservatives, the Shadow Culture Secretary, Nigel Huddleston, a former Google executive who became an MP in 2015 and helped run Kemi Badenoch's leadership campaign.
I mean, how uninspiring are our political class? We haven't got to the end yet. I'm watching this really because Zack Polanski's on for the first time, new leader of the Green Party.
Making his Question Time debut, the new leader of the Green Party, Zack Polanski, a self-confessed eco-populist who, among a number of policies, wants to tax the rich and legalise hard drugs.
Yeah, in other words, somebody who will actually have policies that are going to make a meaningful difference to people's lives. And then there's this odious scumbag.
For Reform UK, Zia Youssef, the self-made millionaire who swapped business for politics and is now the party's head of policy. And the Daily Telegraph columnist Annabel Denham, who says there's now true equality at the top of politics.
Right, so you've got, to balance out the fact that they've got Zack Polanski on, they've got a Tory MP, a Reform UK person, and somebody from the Daily Telegraph. And then somebody from the right of the Labour Party as well, so it's a pretty unbalanced panel, as it always is on Question Time.
The right for men and women to be equally hopeless. Welcome to the programme. Here we are in Shrewsbury or Shrewsbury. Yes, depending on how you say it, as I've been informed. Welcome to the panel and welcome to our audience here, and of course, welcome to you at home. Do join in the conversation on social media if you feel so moved, otherwise just sit back and watch. Right, let's take our first question tonight, which is from Henry Whitaker.
Was Robert Jenrick right to complain about not seeing a white face in Handsworth?
Right, I mean, this is such an easy question to answer unless you're the Tory MP, isn't it? It's obviously a hideously racist comment, and the only reason that you'd even be discussing this as anything other than a racist comment is that our political discourse has shifted so far to the right that apparently you can say things like this now. Let's hear what they say, but, you know, it was obviously a racist comment, and we shouldn't shy away from calling a spade in our political discourse.
Robert Jenrick, who is the Shadow Secretary of State for Justice, a former immigration minister, made some comments which were leaked, made these comments relatively recently, saying that Handsworth in Birmingham, which is just about, an hour from here, was one of the worst integrated places he'd ever been to, that he hadn't seen another white face, and that that's not the kind of country I want to live in. Since you asked the question, Henry, what's your view?
My view is we've never heard anyone complain about not seeing a blackface or pain. So basically...
You weren't happy with it?
No.
OK. Nigel?
Yeah, I think the comments were made a few months ago. But Robert has stood by them and defended them on the basis that it was a statement of fact of his experience of walking around that area. Now, none of us were with him, but if he's making that statement, then I think that's a fair statement to make. What was most important, the bit that probably hasn't been talked about so much, is the commentary he said after about the concern that raised about the lack of integration, and that he would like to see more societies and more parts of the world, and in particular, some of our major cities, where it is obviously and transparently more diverse, therefore signalling...
This just doesn't make sense as a narrative, does it, right? So, Robert Jenrick apparently can tell that somewhere is not integrated based upon what exactly? How many white people he sees walking around, mixing with people from other ethnicities? Is that the barometer of integration? It's really difficult to decode what he's saying unless we assume that he is in fact a racist and he was disconcerted by the number of non-white faces that were walking around. I mean, that's the only way I can sort of understand what he said.
Integration to the degree that he would like to see for, I think he specifically mentioned for his children, for example. So I think that was a fair point to make. Now, people may disagree with the language that Robert used. He's a very robust individual, but I say it was a statement of fact of his observation, making, I think, quite an important point about the lack of...
Did you agree or disagree with his language?
Well, I can't disagree with... well, he was making a statement of fact about what he saw, so that's for Robert to say, and he's better support him on that. I think the important thing, and quite frankly, it's good in some ways, we're now having a debate about the very point he was raising on integration.
I mean, let's talk about integration, right? Because what's really quite a big problem in our society at the moment is that we are being pulled in different directions, and the reason for that is that we have a discourse that has shifted really far to the right and a long way from where average people are in these kinds of debates. And it is the job of mainstream politicians to pull the discourse back, and they're not doing that at the moment. In fact, they're whipping this kind of tension up, and that's destructive to everybody, but it particularly puts minority groups at risk.
Or lack of in British society, and it is a concern.
Okay. Woman, there's a woman there who had her hand up. Oh, there you are. Yes, we're slightly further back.
Handsworth has kind of always been a place that has been produced such amazing culture with poets like Benjamin Zephaniah, Steel Pulses. I think to say that it's poorly integrated into our society is just, it's unfair when it's produced such amazing, talent and art.
Who's going to be the first person to use the word racist? I bet it's Zack Polanski.
Okay, what about the man here in the front?
I'm from Birmingham originally, and I worked in Handsworth many a time. And I can honestly say, someone to come into my city, spend 90 minutes there and make that sort of statement is totally... The way the country is at the moment, how does that make the people who live in Handsworth, work in Handsworth, the people of Birmingham feel?
I think you're making a really important point there, because, by the way, I'm a West Midlands MP. I've spent a lot of time in Birmingham. Birmingham is an incredibly diverse and vibrant city. He
doesn't sound like he's from the West Midlands, does he?
Talking about the very specific area he was going in. Wasn't saying the whole thing about Birmingham, and actually we do celebrate diversity. That was the point. So I do spend a lot of time in Birmingham.
He's talking about Robert Gentry spending 90 minutes there.
Yeah. Look, I mean...
He doesn't know Handsworth.
Well, Robert himself...
He doesn't know the people of Birmingham, and he doesn't know Handsworth. He spent 90 minutes...
Robert was actually born in the West Midlands.
He was born in Wolverhampton.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I believe... he lives in a village of less than 200 people with one coloured black face.
Let's go around the panel.
It says it all.
Zach.
I hear your anger, and I think you're right to be angry. I think we should all be angry when we had 14 years of Conservative austerity that shut our libraries, shut our community centres. And then to say integration is a problem. How do you expect people to integrate if you've taken away their services? Now, look, I'm going to Handsworth tomorrow. I think it's important that a political leader of a party actually goes to speak to people and spends time with people. The Green Party spoke to Benjamin Zephaniah's wife today about using his poem, British. For those of you who don't know the poem, it's a beautiful poem that talks about what multiculturalism is, what it is to bring people together. I'm so glad you've asked this question, Henry, because ultimately we need to make sure that all politicians are speaking about migration in positive sense. Now, of course, there will be people who have problems with migration, but their problems are because they can't get a dentist appointment, because there's not enough council homes, because we've not invested in our communities. But none of these are problems of a black face. These are the problems of multimillionaires and billionaires and the politicians who haven't taxed them properly. We can change that. They're all political choices. Let's make different political choices.
I mean, look, it's actually really smart politics, irrespective of everything else, what Zack is doing, because the other parties, including the Liberal Democrats to some extent, but the Liberal Democrats is maybe a slight anomaly, but they've moved so far to the right with their discourse, and the discourse has shifted with them, that just doing what Zack is doing, which is really, a lot of it is just quite mainstream opinion, is going to pull quite a lot of voters towards the Green Party. I said in my video earlier that the Green Party were at risk of appealing to too narrow a portion of the electorate, and I'm still a little bit concerned about that. But when you see Zack on a panel with lots of other people who are going to be saying very similar things, I think you can start to see the sort of genius of the strategy.
Zia.
Well, look, there are massive issues with integration in this country. I think that is a fact, and I think many people in this country, ordinary, hard-working, lovely British people, feel concerned, quite rightly, about integration in this country. I think Robert Jenrick is not necessarily the best exponent of those concerns, given he served in that Tory government as immigration minister, no less, when 6.5 million net new people were shipped in over 14 years of their government against the wishes of the British people who voted against such mass immigration time and time again. Look.
Yeah, but those people, those 6 point whatever, whatever he said, 2.6 million people are now members of our society. They're contributing to our society. They're paying taxes. They are staffing our public services. And what Reform UK want to do is to say to those people who have got, what's it called, unconditional leave to remain. I don't think that's quite right, but whatever it's called, to say to them, you've got your settled status, but we're going to rip that from under your feet. And we're going to be deporting people. Is that what we as a society really want? I don't think it is. And I think mainstream politicians need to be pushing back against this instead of just, doing what they're doing, particularly Keir Starmer, which is to move further and further to the right and to normalise this discourse.
It is a fact that there are serious issues with immigration in this country. There are serious issues with integration in this country, in no small part because we had 11 million people gross, 6.5 million net new people arrived, fewer hospital beds. The Tories left the country with fewer hospital beds than when they arrived. They left the country with 400 net new prison places. That is why people are so fearful about getting sick right now. That is why people are fearful of crime, and so many violent criminals have to be released early because we lack the prison space. So the Tories catastrophically mismanaged the country. And as bad as this Labour government are, nobody is more accountable for that than the Tories.
And there in the check shirt.
Massive issues with integration, Mr Youssef. That's such a generalisation and such a polarised thing to say. The British public deserve better than that, to be honest. The vast majority of people in this country live very happily and very peacefully together. The Tories have done a terrible job. One other thing that Mr Jenrick said was that Handsworth is a slum. It's a slum possibly due to 14 years of terrible Tory rule in this country. But, Mr Youssef, tonight you will say everything is about immigration. I challenge you not to mention the word immigration tonight. Because not everything in this country is the problem of immigration. There are problems in this country, but it's not just immigration.
Yeah, well, listen, yeah. I'll respond to that directly. I'm afraid I am going to mention immigration because it is, according to the latest...
Yeah, absolutely. As Zack said, the problems in our society have deep roots, and austerity played into them. So did Brexit, right? A massively self-destructive move, leaving our biggest trading partners. And so does the sheer amount of inequality within our society, which leads to a society that is structured whereby you can belong to a rentier class. So, for example, you might just own properties and you might live off the income. And ultimately what you're doing if you live in that rentier class is you're living off assets. You're not contributing anything to society, but you're extracting the money from hard-working people.
Poll, the number one issue for ordinary British people, for voters across this great country. Of course, it's not the only issue. I couldn't agree with that more. And as someone, by the way, who's a second-generation immigrant, whose parents came to this country in the early 1980s, and I'd like to think have contributed. They're given half a century of service between them to the NHS, still practice in their 70s at the NHS. And before people accuse me of not retiring them, all the money in my pockets could not stop them from giving care, because that's who they are. I am proud of what my parents have contributed to this country. I know how much immigrants have contributed, but it is absolutely true that there has been far too much mass immigration in this country. It has been to the detriment of this country. We've had enormous numbers. The Tories are most culpable for that, but I'm afraid the Labour government are frankly pouring gasoline on that problem.
See, do you ever think it's the number one problem because you spend a lot of time spreading misinformation and fear to make it...
Zack, with respect, you just accused me of spreading misinformation. Please tell me, and the people watching at home, what is it that I just said?
Because you've said the first bit, which is correct, that we don't have enough prison spaces, that we don't have enough NHS beds, and that we don't have investment in our communities. What immigrant has taken away those resources, as opposed to those resources being funded. So you can't blame austerity on one hand, but then say it's the immigrants. The immigrants haven't caused austerity. The same Thatcherite policies that you and your party support, and the Conservatives, are what have caused the devastation in this country. And you should take responsibility for that too.
Do you think that 6.5 million net new people arriving inside 14 years, 11 million gross new people arriving in this country, against the wishes of the British people, by the way, who voted against such things in 4
If we were building enough homes and resources, it wouldn't be a problem. Zack is absolutely right. When Clement Attlee was Prime Minister, we used to build 1 million homes a year. It's only a problem because the state is under-resourced, because there's not enough investment going on. And ultimately, yeah, it does. It goes back to 14 years of austerity and underinvestment. And these problems are being blamed on immigrants, and particularly on those coming here, risking their lives, crossing the channel on small boats, 2/3 of whom are genuine asylum seekers who we should be welcoming into our country because they're fleeing war and persecution. But instead of doing that, we demonise them.
consecutive elections. You tell me, you don't think that's going to put pressure on public services?
Well, first of all, we were told Brexit would bring down immigration. Actually, what it's done is brought up immigration.
And you
just
can blame
from other
the Tories
countries.
for that.
So there was a mess that Nigel Farage started with that when he gave misinformation
I
to the
don't
public.
believe Nigel Farage was in government for those 14
Oh, yeah, I think he was pretty around, though, and on question time quite.
He was not in government, I'm afraid.
OK.
All right, tell you what. Should we hear a bit more from our audience?
God, that guy is so smug, isn't he?
Man in the blue sweater.
When it comes to integration, why don't we stop talking about the colour of people's skin and start talking about shared values and social cohesion to start to bring the country back together? What are the panel's thought on that?
OK, and let me just hear from the woman behind you as well in the glasses.
Hello. I was just thinking that if Robert Jenrick came to Shrewsbury and spent an hour, he would probably say there's no black faces, but it's just a generalisation. It has no bearing whatsoever on the integration within our country.
James.
I think a lot of members of the audience have put their points really well this evening. And actually, when the gentleman on the front row was speaking just a few moments ago, talking about Robert Jenrick turning up in somewhere that he just talked down the people there, talked down the place. You know, it made me deeply uncomfortable to see that happening. And actually, people who know the area well, like yourself and like others who have spoken, and Andy Street, the former mayor of West Midlands, you know, he actually said it's an example of a really well-integrated place. You know, so I think there are people who know the area well who are talking positively about what the area has to offer, and I felt really uncomfortable seeing how Robert Jenrick approached it. Now,
Did you also feel uncomfortable when Keir Starmer talked about the United Kingdom risking becoming an island of strangers? He wasn't talking about Handsworth in particular.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, when your own leader uses power-light, I can't get those words out, power-light language in relation to immigration. Nobody on the panel actually so far has just used the word racist to describe the comments. I don't know why.
He was talking about the entire nation.
Well, the point he was making is about social cohesion, and that's actually a point which is being raised here tonight. And look, a lot of people here have talked about integration. And when people are talking about integration, integration is an important question for us to have. You know, we're investing £5 billion in local places to give local people that power over the local areas. But actually, it's not just about government. You know, this question about integration is not just about government ministers.
It's a good policy, that, by the way. They announced that policy in exactly the same week as they announced the digital ID cards scheme. So a communications disaster, because nobody knows about this investment they're putting into local communities to be spent by local people. And why is that? Because in the same week they decided to launch this stupid policy about ID cards. Cynically, though, what they're really trying to do is buy votes in areas of the country where that should be traditional Labour areas by injecting money. Same thing the Tories did when they were in office.
Is coming along and saying what we're going to do, as important as that is, it's also about all politicians, about people in the media, about all of us in our daily lives, playing our role in having a more empathetic society where we look after our neighbours, we have respect for each other, and we operate as one country.
All right, let me just hear from some more people. Yes, the man there in the glasses.
I'm from Liverpool originally, which is a very multicultural city. I've lived in Birmingham for almost 10 years, or previously, and I work there at the moment. I've never felt that there are areas that are not approachable. I thought that the language that Robert Jenrick used was it's endemic of the society that we live in now. It's driving divisiveness. The Reform Party is at the head of that table. The Conservatives haven't done very much for that. But I'd like to hear the panel say how we can move away from being as divisive with our language and how we can try and bring more inclusivity.
All right, let me hear a bit more. Yes, man at the
I can see the chat, by the way. It's just broken on the stream for some reason.
back there.
Yeah, I guess my biggest takeaway from the discussion so far on this is that both Kemi Badenoch on Radio 4 earlier this week and now our Conservative panel member here tonight both defend vehemently Robert Jenrick's comments. And then we have Mr Youssef, who not only is happy now throwing petrol on flames of immigration, but expands the issue to integration. Apparently we live in a very badly integrated country. You know, I lived in Shrewsbury now for about 5 years, and I've lived in Shropshire for over about 30 years. You know, I think we here have seen an increase in the number of immigrants living in Shrewsbury. When I first moved to Shropshire, it was a whites-only area. Now, happily, we see a mixture of cultures, and I'm happy that I'm living here in a culture which is becoming more enriched. As somebody else has said, I think if Mr Jenrick had spent 90 minutes in Shrewsbury 10 years ago, would he have said, oh my goodness, this is a dreadful place, there are no black faces, it's not a country I want my children to grow up in?
Annabelle, so Henry's question was Robert Jenrick right to complain about not seeing another white face in Handsworth? But we've had two people now saying, what about the language and the divisiveness of language?
Well, I've actually found the response to Robert Jenrick's comments very troubling, because I think for too long people in Britain have not felt that they are able to speak out about concerns that they may have over immigration. That might be the numbers, the fact that...
People are allowed to talk about immigration. They are. They just need to be careful about how they talk about it, and being worried about the number of white faces is just straightforwardly racist, and we should be allowed to say that without getting this sort of stupid comment from the usual suspects of the Daily Telegraph.
One single year we had net migration of 906,000 people coming here, not all of whom are going to be net contributors to our economy, but also people are concerned about the failures of integration. And yes, certainly relative to other Western European countries, we are a very successful multi-ethnic society, but I don't think anybody can deny that there is more work that needs to be done. And when politicians stick their head above the parapet and they express some of these views, and perhaps you might find the language that Robert Jenrick used specifically distasteful, but when they're then pilloried and there's an enormous backlash.
A very good comment in the chat. It's not coming up on the screen. People are afraid to talk about immigration, yet it's the only thing the UK seems to ever be talking about. I think that's very apt.
It makes it that bit more difficult for somebody else to come out and speak about it and express fears that they may harbour. And I think that is, as a consequence, too often pushes debate and discussion underground, and it pushes people who have often very legitimate concerns over immigration into the arms of far-right figures like Tommy Robinson.
And what fucking responsibility are you going to take for that? You work for the bloody Daily Telegraph newspaper. It's like, what planet are these people living on? You're actively supporting the shift in our politics to the right, and and then it's like this pearl clutching. Oh my God, Tommy Robinson's suddenly doing well in our politics. You guys enable it.
Man there in the glasses. Yes, you, sir.
I'm originally from Mexico. My family is here with me since 8 years ago. We went through the whole process of Tier 2 visa, indefinite leave to remain. Now we are citizens. And I can tell you for sure that the integration that we have, my sons, it's perfect. The welcoming of the country has been fantastic. And in the company that I work for, we have a lot of people that are from different places. So my experience here is that we can have a very good integration. I don't know why we keep insisting in divisive language.
It's just coded language, isn't it? The talk of integration is just coded language. There might be legitimate concerns about the extent to which, because our public services are underfunded, they may come under strain if there's too much immigration. That might be a legitimate debate that we can have. I personally would blame the underinvestment rather than the immigration, but there we go. When you start talking about integration and the number of white faces, you're just straightforwardly being racist, and you know, it's as clear as day that is what is happening.
And saying that is not happening because it's happening.
And there, in the black top.
I think immigration and migration is always the political football where there's no answers for anything else. The NHS is on its knees. Social care is a major important thing to be looking at in the future. AI itself having an influence on jobs in the future for people that are up and coming and younger. Where's all the plans and all the arguments coming from the policy and different parties from that? There isn't anything. All they want to do is throw the immigration football around and just blame the migrants all the time.
Do you think there's too much about that?
I'm sick of hearing about it. People are aware that people are coming in. We've heard it for years. Every time there's nothing to be answered about, they just throw the immigration thing out again. And that's why the Reform Party is the answer, because of the immigration being an important thing to think about.
And, just bear in mind how much of a disaster it will be if we actually follow the policies of reform. If we start chucking people out, which is what they want to do, the effect that has on the economy is going to be really, really bad. Because we do need people to be contributing towards our society. It's going to be bad for all sorts of reasons, but the economy will suffer.
Can I just come in here? I think there's a couple of things I'd just like to say. First of all, if any of you had listened to the whole discussion that Robert Jenrick had, if any of you listened to Robert Jenrick's debate and discussion at Conservative Party conference, which we probably should have been talking about, you'd get a completely different feeling and a message of tolerance and inclusivity.
I bet you wouldn't.
That was the point. Maybe we ought to wonder why it is that during Conservative Party conference, a leaked message came out on a very minute thing, on a specific area, out of context, and was then sent to the media during Conservative Party conference. Come on, we're not that stupid. There is a reason why somebody did that, instead of, and to stop us talking about the positive things, for example, that we talked about at Conservative Party conference, or indeed all the other party conferences, in order to divide. It's exactly the point that has been made here.
Like giving a multi-billion-pound tax break to the wealthiest people in our society, which is what the stamp duty repeal will do. It's a clever policy move by the Tories because everybody benefits a little bit from it. I'm thinking of moving house soon. I'll benefit when I move house by a few £1,000. But who benefits the most? It's people with massive houses, isn't it? So it isn't yet another Tory tax break for their rich mates. And just going back to what I was saying earlier, what Reform UK are talking about is police turning up in their uniforms, knocking on your neighbour's door, dragging them out of their houses and deporting them. That's the reality that we're going to be dealing with. Communities torn apart because people were stupid enough to vote in a Reform government. But unfortunately, the way our electoral system works, it only takes about a third of people to be convinced by that bullshit, and we end up with a Reform government with a massive majority because the voting system is broken.
People play things in order to cause division, and we shouldn't be playing at that. And actually, if you were at our conference, you would have heard a different message.
It's all okay to talk about it at political parties. Talk about it in Parliament and get things through.
Yeah.
Sort things out.
Yeah. And believe me, look, and the conversation we've had today, I hear in my constituency all the time. We do engage. Immigration is a big issue, but we're talking about a much broader variety of things here this afternoon.
Woman at the back.
This way, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say, I too come from South East London originally, lived in Shropshire for nearly 30 years, and I love the fact that this is not a purely white town. I love Shropshire, I love Shrewsbury. The other side to it is there are hundreds of people in this county who would not receive any social care at all, or any care, if we didn't have people coming to work in this county from other countries, and I welcome them all and say thank you.
So, look, it's great. You know, we've obviously had a lot of people in this audience asking questions who clearly are delighted about the levels of immigration, and that's fine, like, genuinely great. But I'm afraid this audience is not representative of the country. And right now, many people in
It
this
is
great country,
representative of the
many
support
people
for
in this
reform,
country,
I might
many
just point
people in
out.
this country, many people in this country feel massively betrayed by the Conservative Party, who, by the way, in their 2010 manifesto, their 2015 manifesto, their 2017 manifesto, their 2019 manifesto said they would bring net migration down to the...
It's true, right? Lots of people do feel like that. And as I was saying, the problem is that our voting system rewards whoever can get the most votes at a general election. Usually that's 40%. But because of the crazy way that our politics is going, with the Labour Party losing support, the Tories losing support, the Lib Dems doing okay, the Greens doing okay, you can win a general election at the moment with 30% of the vote. So, you know, it's always a problem with the first past the post, isn't it? But Reform are going to win, and they're not reflective of what most people think. They're just managing to unite enough right-wingers around them that they pose a significant threat of winning.
Of thousands. Instead, they left office with that number at over 1 million, and 6.5 million net new people arrived inside their 14 years of government. And let's talk about the health service, because again, this is a lie that is peddled. You could restaff every doctor and nurse in the NHS, which is close to my heart because my parents have given their life to it. You could restaff every doctor and nurse with just 1 year's net immigration based on the rate of the last 3 years. And there is currently an employment crisis for doctors in this country. Look at the British Medical Association, who are on their knees pleading with the government, saying half of the homegrown British doctors who are in their foundation year do not have a job. Let me say that again. Half of the homegrown British doctors in their foundation year do not have a job to go to. So, I'm sorry, the notion...
It's got nothing to do with immigration. It's to do with that system not working. So this is just bollocks.
I don't in any way misunderstand why people take the view, because it is a lie that is peddled. The notion that the NHS needs more immigration to function is the opposite of the truth. The NHS is in part buckling under the pressure of enormous health tourism that is happening, and our own doctors, our own British doctors who are struggling, and the BMA's on its knees right now begging the government to create more training places for them, because there's 50% of them, according to the BMA, you can look it up on their website, do not have jobs.
Okay.
Right, so the solution to that is to create more training places, obviously, because we need more doctors in the health system. I don't really understand what this has got to do with the debate, to be honest.
I'm going to move on. I know you want to come to that, but you'll definitely get your chance. Right, I'm going to take another question now, but before I do, I just want to say where we are next week, which is Bishop Stortford in Hertfordshire. The week after that, we're off to Swindon.
I'm so relieved that we're moving beyond that question. It was winding me up.
So if you live in or near either of those areas, Bishop Stortford or Swindon, you want to come and be part of the audience, ask your questions, go to the Question Time website, follow the instructions there, and hopefully we will see you. Right, let's take another question. Big story of the day. Robert Cumming.
If Donald Trump does get peace deal in Gaza, will the left-leaning party policies, will they finally admit that he's the Don done good?
Has the Don done good? Well, I think the Don...
Okay, so I'm going to give my own 2 cents here. It's good that there might be a ceasefire. It will at least provide temporary relief for the people of Gaza who've been bombed to oblivion. Roughly half of the deaths being children in Gaza. I haven't looked at the figures recently because I can barely bear to look at them, but it was something like 60,000 last time I looked. Maybe that was a long time ago. We're talking about tens of thousands of innocent people who've been murdered by the Israeli state. It is a genocide. That's what the United Nations has concluded about it. So the fact that, you know, we're going to get some relief, which I think will be temporary, because I think the release of the hostages will mean that the political pressure on the Israeli government to not continue with the bombardment will disappear, and the right-wing forces within Netanyahu's cabinet will push him. Not that he needs much pushing to continue this, because their ultimate objective is to get rid of the population of Gaza, either through killing them or through ethnic cleansing, so that they can take over the territory themselves. So I don't think they're going to be satisfied by this peace deal, which is balmy anyway. The idea that, for example, Tony Blair should have a role in in the reconstruction of Gaza, given his background and experience in the Middle East, is laughable. But that is where we are. So that's what I think. Let's hear from the panel.
Thinks he's done good. There's not much doubt about that. James?
Look, we should definitely recognise President Trump's role in what's happening in the Middle East. And we should recognise the fact that us working with him and with other partners around the world is the way that we have now got to this position. And
It just, honestly, it winds me up, right? Because, again, what the West should have been doing from day one, literally the day after October 7th, was warning the Israeli state that there would be consequences if they overreacted. And they didn't do that. There's been no constraint. The red line that was put in place by Biden was stepped across and nothing happened. No sanctions, no threats. They weren't even kicked out of Eurovision, right? I mean, it's disgusting the way our governments have reacted towards this. And I've been too quiet about it on my channel, to be honest. I've been to protests and what have you. As you know, I was arrested under the Terrorism Act a few weekends ago. So, I've done my bit, but we all should have been speaking out more about this and putting pressure on our governments to do something. And whether that would have worked, I don't know. But we've reached a very sad place because God knows what happens to Gaza now. It is rubble. It's been totally destroyed. There are loads of children there without families to look after them. There are children starving. There are whole families that have been wiped out. I mean, it's really unthinkably evil what has been done to Gaza.
Can I just say that we've had so many false dawns in terms of getting a ceasefire, getting hostages out, getting aid in over the last 2 years that I almost dare not to hope that this is a real breakthrough. But it does feel a bit different.
I mean, I'd give John Major, I'm just responding to the chat, the Good Friday Agreement is a major achievement of the Blair years. John Major was a big part of that as well. So yeah, Blair deserves some credit there. But he's not well liked in the Middle East for a reason.
I feel there is a glimmer of real hope in what has been announced in the last 24, 36 hours. And, I just hope so deeply that this is a ceasefire that lasts and all the hostages are released and aid gets in, and then we get on that pathway towards a two-state solution with a safe and secure Israel alongside a Palestinian state.
Right, but what are we going to do if it doesn't hold? What incentive is there for the Israeli state to stick to the agreement? That's what you can't just hope in politics. There's got to be real politic behind it. Like, what do we do when inevitably Israel break the ceasefire? Is there any teeth there? Are we going to do anything?
Which we know is the way to have long-lasting peace in the region. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
Are you saying that you contributed to this peace deal? Are you saying the Labour government contributed to it?
The Prime Minister's been playing a role with international partners.
Well, Secretary Rubio in Trump's cabinet has come out publicly saying that the early and, in their view, premature recognition of a Palestinian state actively set back the peace deal. Do you want to apologise?
The recognition. Let me take this head on, right? The recognition of the state of Palestine was a decision that we took along with other international partners. Other countries did the recognition around the same time as that we did, and that's important.
You all made a bad decision.
It's important to have a collaboration with international partners when we're talking about what's happening in the Middle East. And the reason why we did that, the reason why we decided to recognise Palestine at this stage, is to make sure that we keep alive that prospect, that hope of a two-state solution.
So Secretary Rubio literally said that recognising Palestine prematurely
Palestinian state alongside Israel is the way to have long-term peace and security for both the Palestinians and the Israelis.
It's just weasel words. They don't mean it. Two-state solution has become just an expression that politicians use to seem like they give a shit about the situation. I'm sorry. How on earth do you make a two-state solution work when the Israelis have massive amounts of settlements in the West Bank, where they're repeatedly encroaching on Palestinian territory, and where they have bombed Gaza to rubble? I don't know. I don't know how you make that work. I just think it's something that politicians say so they can say something that sounds positive.
I should say that we're recording this programme before the Israeli cabinet has finished meeting and signed off on this ceasefire deal. I'm saying that just in case it all goes pear-shaped, but I'm obviously fervently hoping that it does not. Zack, is it time for left-leaning political parties, that's why I'm coming to James and to you first, is it time they admit the Don done good?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that Israel's ongoing genocide has resulted on average in a classroom of children dying every single day in Palestine. 55,000 children are malnourished, so of course a ceasefire should be welcomed. But also let's be clear about who Donald Trump is. Not only is he a racist misogynist, he's someone who said that Gaza should be turned into a luxury Riviera. So I don't think for a second we should pretend that he wants a ceasefire because he cares about Palestinian lives all of a sudden. He wants a ceasefire. I think, second, whilst welcoming the ceasefire, we also know this is really a three-stage process. We need this ceasefire as quick as possible, but we also then need to talk about peace. And we need to make sure we're bringing everyone around the table. And I think our role in that is making sure that Palestinian voices are heard in the same way that Israeli voices are heard. And the idea that Tony Blair is going to be at the head of this table is like bringing an arsonist to put out a fire. It just makes absolutely no sense at all. And actually, we need to make sure that the right people, the people on the ground from the grassroots, are the people leading this. And then thirdly, I think there does need to be a reckoning. We need to recognise that this has been a stain on our humanity, our global humanity. And our government has not just been complicit, they have actively enabled with the selling of arms to Israel. It's time to stop the genocide, stop sharing intelligence, and make sure we have a free Palestine. Thank you.
Can I just, Rob?
I mean, that's the mainstream position of international organisations and human rights organisations, that it is in fact a genocide. And yet Zack is the only person on the panel that is willing to say that word.
Where are you sitting? I've lost track of where you are. Can we just get a microphone back to Robert? What's your view?
Yeah, I'm no big fan of Trump, but I mean, if it does work, then you've got to give him some sort of credit. And yeah, he probably is doing it for himself, his own ego, but who cares if it brings peace? It doesn't matter, does it?
Okay, man here in the stripy t-shirt.
Couldn't we have reached this point a lot quicker if Trump and Starmer and all the politicians had put more pressure on Israel to actually stop the genocide in Gaza? I mean, it is a genocide.
And they've done this before, right? So this is not a hypothetical. My knowledge of the history is not great, right? But I know that in previous instances where Israel have overstepped the mark, America have cut off arms supplies. That is what they could have done. That is what they should have done, and it would have worked. So, this was a genocide aided and abetted by the American state and by the British state. We have blood on our hands, unfortunately. So we shouldn't then, after we've been partly responsible for what happened, after we've provided them with political cover, with support, we shouldn't then be clapping our hands and saying, well, once they've decimated the entire Gaza Strip, killing tens of thousands of children, half of the victims being children, we shouldn't then say, oh, congratulations. It is, at every stage, they've done the bare minimum.
Because the UN says so.
No, I mean, sorry, not even the bare minimum. It's. I just can't believe that Donald Trump might get a Nobel Peace Prize for this. I just can't believe it.
Could we have got there quicker? Nigel?
I don't think we could have got there quicker because Hamas was not releasing the hostages. And actually the British government could have put pressure when they unilaterally...
They were releasing hostages until Israel broke the last ceasefire. So that's just bollocks.
When they declared... Well, when they declared declaration recognising Palestine, why didn't they put and release the hostages as a condition? Why didn't they put conditions on Hamas? They didn't. That was ridiculous.
Okay with,
that was.
With Israel
of course I'm not. Sir, please don't.
Not members of Hamas.
Sir, of course I am not.
Okay, who did nothing wrong.
Of course I am not. Please don't put words in my mouth. I'm saying actually we could have helped move things forward if actually we'd said, at some point or some alternative thing, part of the hostages were part of the deal. They weren't. I think that was absolutely terrible. And all the other countries, just because others joined in and did the same, they were all wrong. Doesn't make it right just because other people do stupid things as well.
How does continuing a bombing campaign in the Gaza Strip and cutting off food and water, how does that help the hostages? Because they're suffering under the bombardment too. They're starving too. It doesn't help the situation, right? So what was needed was political pressure on Israel to stop this from continuing, and that just wasn't there.
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. In terms of the answer to the question, the gentleman's right. Donald Trump transparently deserves some credit for this because he's probably the only person in the world who could help actually get us to this point, along with and working with, of course, Qatar, Egypt, Turkey and others. But this is a horrendous situation. I'm really pleased that we've got to this point. But as somebody who's met the parents of hostages, and I was in Israel and Palestine, by the way, a few weeks ago, I have seen the harm and the damage on both sides. I am relieved and encouraged. It looks like we are now going to see an end of solution. But let's be clear here, there was a ceasefire. It was broken on the 7th of October when Hamas conducted terrorist attacks.
Woman at the back there in the glass.
I've been to Israel and I've been to the West Bank several times over the years, and I've met some really, really wonderful Jewish people. I met some really, really wonderful Palestinian people. And I've encountered some very scary extremists on both sides. But what we have here today from Donald Trump are words. It's deeds, not words. The detail behind what happens after today, and I really do pray today that that ceasefire happens, is the devil in the detail. Is this going to be a long-term lasting peace? I really don't know. I really pray they do. But until we recognise as individuals, as people who live, just trying to live their daily lives on both sides, and to try and understand the impact on both sides, and to put to one side the labels that we so happily slap on people, and we just see Jew and Muslim and Israeli and Palestinian and Christian, and we actually talk about what that means and the detail and the complexity behind that, then they haven't got a hope of anybody truly understanding the other person's point of view. It's too political, it's too much about the easy slap on the labels, and we need to think about the people it affects on both sides.
Ian, is it time for the left-leaning political parties to admit the Don done good?
Well, look, in my lifetime, I think this is the closest we have come to an enduring peace in the Middle East in my lifetime. I think that is an incredible thing. Of course there's more work to do. Are there ways this could go wrong from here? Of course. But the fact that we are in this situation is something to behold. I'm personally hugely grateful for it. I think if it succeeds, and again, we are closer to that success than ever, certainly, again, in recent history, I think huge credit then must go to President Trump. I want to reiterate, though,
we're not the closest we've ever been. It was Itzhak Rabin in his negotiations that was the closest we've ever been, and what happened to him was that he was shot dead by somebody on the right.
That Labour have in any way contributed to this, when literally Secretary Rubio has gone on the record to explicitly say that the early, in their view, premature recognition of a Palestinian state.
Just responding to the chat, so people are talking about what would happen to the settlers in, any kind of solution, really. And the answer, I think, is that they would live in a democratic state where everybody has equal rights. They wouldn't have to leave. I don't think any solution can involve, kicking people out of what they regard as their homes, whether they started living there legally or not. The settlers have been living in that territory for a long period of time, but the walls have to go, communities have to come together. And everybody has to be equal in a democratic society. That's the solution, right? And now, how do you get there? I don't know. But you can't start any kind of solution with massive population exchanges. It's got to be based upon democracy and equality.
Set back the process is important. But yes, look, I echo that perspective that there has been untold suffering on both sides, and it is enormously hopeful right now, and I really hope President Trump succeeds.
So the Nobel Peace Prize Committee announced who they are going to award that prize to tomorrow. Now, Donald Trump has made no secret that he says lots of people tell him he should get it. You kind of get the impression he thinks he should get it as well. Should he, Zia?
I think that's a decision for the committee to make.
Of course it is. Well, do you think he should get it?
All right. So you know what? Let's talk about this. Come on. President Obama was awarded that award he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in his first year of his presidency, and his own words, in Obama's own words, he said, for what? I think is objectively and decisively true. That what President Trump, like him or loathe him, if you will just look at the objective facts, the peace accords where across the Middle East, which he got no credit for whatsoever, and I understand why people have concerns about President Trump, but if you look at it objectively, if President Trump won it, I think it's very difficult to make an argument that President Trump doesn't deserve it.
Annabelle.
Well, just those 2 points. First, should Trump win the Nobel Peace Prize? No, I don't think he should, because whilst he's being sensible on Ukraine now, what he has done since becoming US president for a second time is embolden Putin, is encourage aggression, and made it more difficult for there to be a resolution to that conflict. This is not a peacemaking president for all of his potential in getting that agreement over the line in the Middle East, which of course we should absolutely all cautiously welcome. But to the question about whether Don has done good specifically on the issue of Israel and Gaza, yes, I think he has, and I think these developments completely discredit the actions that we've seen of the left in Britain and the way in which they have fueled anti-Semitism in this country to such a degree that 1 in 5 people now hold views which are considered to be anti-Semitic, which personally I find absolutely horrifying. It has also discredited the Starmer administration, which over the course of the last 2 years, since that terrible pogrom on October the 7th, has treated one of our great allies and the democracy surrounded by a ring of fire in the Middle East as though it's some sort of adversary. So we have suspended certain arms sales. We have recognised Palestinian statehood, which, as Zia says, has made peace that much more difficult to achieve. And it would be rather nice if we could hear some sort of apology or see some sort of contrition from those who have contributed and behaved in this way.
What the hell is she talking about? What the hell? I can't even get it into my head. What is she talking about? Who should be apologising for what? The apology that we should be offering, that Starmer should be offering, that the British government should be offering, is, well, first of all, for our long history in that part of the world. It's our fault in the first place. It's a product of the post-war situation. It's a product of the Balfour Declaration. It's a product of what happened after World War II, where we had to quickly retreat from empire, so we handed it over to the United Nations and we created this whole problem. But what we've done during this conflict in supporting the Israeli state with arms and logistical support has been morally appalling. We should be apologising for that. And the idea that that those people who've been out on the streets protesting against what's been going on, the idea that those people are anti-Semites is grossly offensive, as I'm sure Zack is about to say, as the only Jewish man on the panel.
You want to come in?
Yes. So I'm Jewish, and the reason why that's relevant is I'm one of 5 Jewish people to lead a British political party in the last 100 years. So I take anti-Semitism really seriously, in the same way that I take Islamophobia seriously, because I recognise when they come for one minority group, they come for all of us. And I was really proud of Shrewsbury from the conversation we had earlier about migration and integration, because I think what we're hearing here about the compassion and the kindness towards the other reflects the very best of being British. You can be, in fact, the only way to be morally consistent is to condemn what happened on October 7th and the terrorist attack against civilians, and condemn the genocide in Palestine. Because as...
Yeah, but Zach, your deputy leader has done nothing of the sort. He's stoked the flames in his comments. I don't know how you could say that. The idea that the Greens are nice, fluffy bunnies. The day after the 7th of October, he made inflammatory comments, undeniably inflammatory comments. Now, after people questioned him, he did then come back and apologise for them.
Can you tell us what those inflammatory comments were?
I don't have the quote here, but honestly, you can find it out. No, he did. I think he's also taken other comments down off social media. So I'm afraid, look, let's be clear here. You've got members, senior members of your party, stoking the flames here, and let's not pretend otherwise.
Well, let's be clear here.
Can you enlighten us as to what those comments were?
I genuinely don't know what the comment specifically was, but I think we're hearing a rattled political attack here. Because as a Jewish man, I feel the genocide very, very deeply. Imagine what it must be like to be a Muslim man and to see who could be your family and your relatives, to see how that's being behaved. Now, I want everyone to treat politics with sensitivity, with nuance, to bring kindness and compassion. I think the woman up there, spoke really powerfully earlier about bringing...
Can I just say, I'm a Muslim, and you're calling me a fascist. Are you going to extend that courtesy to me?
You absolutely are a fascist. You're from a far-right party. Right. You're Nigel Farage.
Let's just be clear about that.
Hang on, wait. I'm going to let Zack talk, and then I'm going to let you come in. Now, wait a minute.
Your concern about Muslims extends only so much as they agree with your political opinion.
I realise he's made an allegation. I'm going to let Zack talk, and then I'm going to let you respond.
Let's bring the receipts. Nigel Farage, he joined forces with the Swedish Democrats in the European Parliament. This is a far-right Nazi group. They want to deport people, not based on the colour of his skin, but from the places that they've come from. They also, Nigel Farage talks about it being the end of democracy because of the way certain ethnic minorities are voting. These aren't robust words, as Annabelle called them earlier, or we've heard on the conversation. This is racism, it's fascism, and we should call it out.
Zia.
OK, so what we want to do is deport people on the basis of whether they are legally entitled to be in this country. That has nothing to do with race, ethnicity, nor religion. Now,
that's not true. They want to deprive people of settled status who've lived here for a very long time. So in other words, changing the law so that people who had previously thought that they could live here and work here, they no longer can. So it's not the case that they're only going to be dealing with so-called illegal migration. They're going to be extending the net much more broadly than that. Zack's right to call it out.
Stalker, you accused me earlier, let alone fascist, you said that I was peddling disinformation. And I think people watching this programme at home, given the Green Party are right now, to be fair, they're surging in the polls, it's important that people know this. When Zack Polanski is making seductive claims to you, it's important that you understand, before he came into politics, he literally made money by charging women on the promise that he could literally enlarge the size of their breasts by hypnotising them. That is a true statement. And by the way, if you think that's insane, his policies are even more insane. He wants a world without borders. He wants open borders. He wants us to stand down and destroy our nuclear deterrent as Vladimir Putin belligerently marauds into Ukraine. He wants a communist economic system. He wants to legalise all drugs. And in Zack Polanski's version of Britain, his version of Britain, it is legal to sell fentanyl, crack cocaine and heroin, but illegal to rent your flat out. This is the most unserious person to enter British politics in my lifetime.
OK, listen, I'm going to let you respond. There's a whole heap of things there. Do you want to start off with the hypnotherapy? Well, because not everyone may be...
Oh, this is pathetic. It's utterly ridiculous. She needs to allow Zack to respond however he wants because he's just been subject to a tirade of stuff. It's impossible to respond to all that stuff, right? Because you'd have to go through each of the policies individually and explain what you're wanting to do. So making it illegal to be a landlord, right? So this is because the Green Party passed a policy saying they wanted to abolish landlords. But what the policy detail is there is that they want to tax landlords more, particularly on second homes that they are renting out, that they want to institute a maximum rent, obviously to help people who are forced to rent. They want to do things like this. I've not read the policy in a lot of detail, but it's not making it illegal to be a landlord. What it is saying is landlordism isn't good for our society because fundamentally it is empowering a rentier class to live off the wages of other people. And so, like other things in our society that we don't think are good, we should tax them. To enable people to live minimally decent lives, there should be a floor so that rents can't rise above the sort of money that people can afford in a particular area. That's all the Green Party are saying. But you can't expect Zack to go into that much detail about every single policy. I don't happen to agree with the Green Party about drugs. I'm pro legalising some drugs if they can be suitably regulated. I also think that the war on drugs has been lost. But legalising all drugs, it's a very difficult policy to sell, and as you've just seen, I think this is exposing one of the difficulties of the Green Party because it's a very democratic party. The membership decide the policy. So that means that the leader of the party is going to have to defend everything that passes conference, because that is party policy. And as you've just seen, that puts Zack in quite a difficult position.
Aware of it, but as I understand it, you spoke to a journalist in The Sun who came to you and said, can you make my breast bigger through hypnotherapy? And you said yes, and gave it a go.
I said no, and they said, would you be willing to do it as an experiment? I said, as long as you make it clear, it's not something I do, it's not something I charge for, it's absolutely
Zack, that's not true. I'm sorry, Zack. I'm sorry, I've got a correct record on that. That is not true.
And then actually, amazingly,
people
hang on a minute. When you talk over each other, no one at home can hear. As I remember, you were quoted as saying, actually, loads of people might go for this because it's safer and cheaper than a boob job.
Right, so this was 12 years ago, before I was a politician.
Just giving you the chance to respond.
I think it's important to own when you've made a mistake, and I've owned that. It's 12 years on now. I think Tony Benn, one of my favourite politicians, said, I don't care where you've come from, I care where you're going. And what I want to ask Zia, if we're talking about people's past records, Nathan Gill, this is a man who was found guilty on bribery with the Russian
That was really slick. Dodging that.
state. Now, Zia said that Nigel Farage and Reform did not know who this man was. But Nigel Farage, including the day after Brexit happened, was pictured with 4 men behind him. One of them being former MEP for Reform, Nathan Gill. The man that Zia says no one knows who he was. So were you lying, or was Nigel Farage lying?
Zack, I'm afraid, if you want to use the word lie, let's be clear about something. You are lying. What I said is I have never met. I took over as chairman in the summer of last year. I will tell you, I have never met Nathan Gill in my life. I have never met.
Farage has met thousands of people. He doesn't know who this man is. So is that a lie?
I said he meets tens of thousands across the course of a year.
Okay.
Over the course of a year.
And Zack, is this believable? This sounds like
at the time that this guy was the Welsh leader, Reform was polling at like 1% in Wales. Listen, here's the fact. Here are the facts of the matter. Reform.
Hang on.
I have never met him before. He is not an important figure
inside Reform. Because you're filibustering, and everyone can
Nigel was not leader when he had a position inside Reform.
So was he stood behind Nigel Farage in the picture, or was he not?
Okay, I tell you what, hang on a minute.
People who are standing
everybody there in the audience,
Nigel Farage,
can I just say, people in the audience, hang on, Izzy. I appreciate you both feel really strongly about.
It's not very good chairing, is it, by Fiona Breese? Because she allowed the attack that Zia made towards Zack, which she shouldn't have allowed. She should have kept things focused on the debate, and then of course she had to allow the attack in the other direction. It just gets derailed. I actually lost track of what Zack was even talking about there. But look, more politicians should be doing this to Reform. They should be attacking them every opportunity they get. They're in the lead in the polls, and they're a dangerous force in our politics. So well done for Zack for trying to do that. But I don't think it went particularly well on this occasion.
Nathan Gill, but I can see that people in the audience are going.
I'm
not sure this is going to make an enormous
bribery from Russia.
Right, okay.
For our national security.
Zack, you've made your point, but I think there's other things that the audience wants to talk about. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And me.
Right, where are we with time? All right.
Can I just ask you one very quick question? Do you think that it is helpful and conducive to having open and free discussion of often very contentious issues if you immediately launch into ad hominem attacks on anybody who disagrees with you or dissents from your worldview? Rather than introducing people, shouldn't we actually discuss the very, very important issues at play?
I agree. I don't think this is an ad hominem attack. I think if it's bribery from Russia, that's a pretty serious...
All right, exactly. I think we think... No, do you know what? No, I'm not, Nigel, I'm going to stop you, simply because there's other questions this audience really want to ask, and they're not going to get a chance unless we allow them to get a word in edgeways. Emma Lent.
This is the problem with having a panel that is structured like it is. If you've got 3 right-wingers on the panel, and you've got 1 lone left-wing voice, then they're just going to get leapt upon, aren't they? Because it's not a fair representation of I've never seen a panel on Question Time, maybe once, where there was more left-wingers on it. It's just totally unfair, particularly with the Labour Party being where they are. It's practically 4 right-wingers on the panel.
Where are you? Have I pronounced your name properly, actually, first of all? Yes. There we go. Emma, off you go.
The welfare system should be a safety net and not a lifestyle choice. Who will be brave enough to sort this out?
Oh, for fuck's sake. It's not a lifestyle choice to be on benefits. It just isn't. We live in a country where universal credit is given to people who have jobs to top up their wages because they're not paid enough. So what we need is a politician who's going to be brave enough to deal with some of these problems. People need to be paid more. We need a higher minimum wage. We need stronger trade unions. And we actually need a more generous welfare system. If you compare our welfare system to most of the countries in Europe, it does not replace wages in anywhere near the capacity that, say, somewhere like Germany or France does. It's not a generous welfare system. It is a lie to say that it is. It's certainly not a lifestyle choice. You just can't have that view if you actually look at the data.
Emma, you're not very happy about it.
I think it's very easy for people to not go into work. I still think it's not very easy. I don't think it's getting any better under the government we have now.
James?
I think you're absolutely right, Emma, that people who can work should work. I think that should be a fundamental of our society. I think a lot of us would agree.
Right, like landlords should work then, right? Like very rich people should work. The people in our society who are the laziest are people who've got assets and just live off the income from their assets. It's not ordinary people at the very bottom of our society, some of whom can't work because they're too unwell to work. It's not them we should be concerned about. It is the ultra-rich who are sitting there, the Duke of Westminster, sitting there at home right now, not a care in the world, living off the money that he gets from owning half of London, having paid next to no inheritance tax when his father died and he inherited it when he was in his 20s. They're the sort of people that are really creaming off the rest of us in society. They've never worked a day in their life, and nobody ever gets angry about that on platforms like this. Maybe Zack will point this out.
With that principle. And one of the things that we're conscious of is that a lot of people have been put on benefits and kind of written off, and they're just written off to many years or a lifetime on benefits.
Being a landlord isn't a job. I'm just responding to something in the comments. What landlordism is, it is holding the housing stock to ransom and then demanding that people who work for their money cough up 40% of their wage in order to live in a property, and their money goes towards paying off somebody else's mortgage because of the way that the mortgage market is structured in the UK. It's a fundamentally immoral way to live in Britain, and the only way it's possible is because the mortgage market has been structured in the way that it has. If you go back in time to I think the 1940s, but I could be wrong. So it's the beginning of the century, let's say. Mortgages were based upon building societies, and people couldn't borrow in the same way. Buy-to-let mortgages didn't exist until the 1980s, and it's a structural problem in our economy as well, right? Because if you've got people who are simply earning money from assets rather than doing real work in the real economy, then the economy is not going to grow because what you create is a rentier economy where people live off the income from their assets rather than actually doing productive things that cause economic growth. So it is actually a huge structural problem in the British economy that we have this class of people who do very little and live off the labour of other people.
And not help to get into work, even when they can work, even when with a little bit of support at the right time in their life, they would get into a world of work and then be able to hold down a job. And one of the things that we're doing is investing £1 billion over the next 5 years to help 300,000 people into work. Now, these are people who are out of the job market and not looking for work, but they can work and they just need a bit of help to get into work.
But hang on, the
they
plan you had on benefits all went pretty pear-shaped because you were trying to save, what was it, 5 billion or something on welfare reforms. Then you had a massive rebellion, and so you decided, right, we'll just do 2.5 because we're not going to get it through.
Well, we took those reforms to Parliament, and people know what happened when we discussed it there. But what I'm talking about is the focus on getting people into work, because actually the best way to help crack this problem is to say to the people who can work and who should work, right, what do you need to get you into work? And actually, just today, we've launched one of the ways in which we're going to spend some of that money I spoke about earlier.
Well, I've got an idea of how to get these lazy, very, very rich people into work. It's called a wealth tax. And we should set it very, very high because the Duke of Westminster doesn't need to own half of London, does he? So why don't we tax the hell out of him and then ask him to actually get a job and contribute towards our society?
which is getting people into GP surgeries to say they can meet people who are unwell and who are maybe on benefits and say, right, what do you need to get you into work? How can we help get you into work? Because the one thing which I think is just unacceptable is for us to say, as a country, as a government, you know what, if you're ill and you're not working, but you could work with a bit of help, we're just going to forget about you and we're going to pay you your benefits for years and years on end and we're going to write you off. That's what's unacceptable.
Nigel.
I know exactly what you're getting at, and it's frustrating lots and lots of people. Now, we were tackling...
And in response to the comment that you always get when you mention a wealth tax, if they take their money and leave, that is absolutely fine, because what you can't take is the assets, right? So the structural problem in our society is caused by the fact that you have lots and lots of very rich people who buy up the assets that should be used by ordinary people to live and hold them to ransom. And what I mean by holding them to ransom is that when they're able to, because the tax system allows it and the way that the whole structure allows it, they buy up houses and then they rent them out. They hold them to ransom. Nobody can use them unless they pay the rent, and the rents are set at levels that the law allows. You don't have to structure a society like this. You could have rent controls. You could tax second homes more. You could discourage or abolish buy-to-let mortgages. There are things that the government could do to stop us having this kind of rentier economy. The Green Party have proposed these very sensible changes, and they should go ahead. And hopefully the Labour Party will adopt some of them, because it's not good for our society when very, very wealthy people hold bricks and mortar to ransom for hard-working people's money.
Bits of the welfare bill when we were last in power. And if any of you did watch Conservative Party conference, you would have seen that this was a core theme of Kemi's speech and what we've been announcing. Because in order to get the welfare bill down, that is vitally important in terms of growing the economy and making sure that we've got stronger borders, the themes of our conference. The two come together. Because we can only spend what we have.
It's probably worth pointing out is that much of the increase in health and disability spending happened under Conservatives, as you were in power a long time. Nearly £20 billion increase from 2019 to 2024.
Yeah. Well, and again, some of this is hangover from the pandemic, where we spent £400 billion out of necessity. The problem is the pandemic is having massive long-term consequences, and we need to help people into work. 6.5 million people are not able to work. But Fiona, forgive me, because you've interrupted me, and you always do this on the show, and I never get to answer the question because I always end up answering yours.
Hang on, I get to...
I don't understand people who defend landlordism. I just don't. Homes are to live in. Simple as that. The state should provide enough homes for people to live in, which they haven't done because of the sell-off of council housing. And individuals need homes big enough for them to live in. I actually have an odd view as a socialist, which is that I've got a spare bedroom in this house. I actually think there's something immoral about having a spare room in your house because you're under-occupying the housing stock. Because I'm a single person occupying a house, I intend to sell this house soon and move to a one-bedroom flat so that I'm not under-occupying the housing stock. It's not right. People need housing in this country. There's a shortage of housing. So I feel strongly about this enough that actually I'm going to make changes in my own life to make sure that I'm not under-occupying the housing stock.
Really give you a chance after. Don't blame me, Nigel Huddleston, if you don't want to answer the question.
But the point here is it's really important because, look, our manifesto going to the next election and the announcements last week, we were able to make announcements on things like abolishing stamp duty, business rates relief. How and why? Only because we've done the hard work to say this is how we would pay for it, and this is specifically how we would be able to reduce benefits. Because, for example, there's way too many people who do need help and support, and one of the best ways you can do that is getting a job by making sure that they...
So I'm trying not to get distracted by the chat, but I'm just going to get distracted one more time. Clement Attlee's government, in the first 6 years they were in power, because they were in power between 1945 and 1951, they built 800,000 council houses. Right? So yes, the state should have a responsibility to make sure there are enough houses for people to live in. Absolutely. Otherwise, we go back to the situation. In fact, we already are there, right? Because we don't have enough council housing, people are forced into temporary accommodation, and by temporary accommodation we mean hotel rooms, right? So you've got families living in hotels in totally unsuitable conditions for their children, and that's because of the sell-off and failure to replace council housing. It's a failure of successive governments, but it is a huge problem. We need to build more council housing, and we can do it. The government just needs to commit the resource to do that.
Get back into work with, say, low-level mental health distress. So these are people with anxiety and other things. It shouldn't stop them from working. But also the whole thing here, they do need a job. This government is doing a terrible job, 180,000 job losses since they got power. Therefore, you need to spur on the economy. So I say we've got a plan here. You're making a really important point. It is so frustrating for people who see other people, their neighbours, whatever, have a better lifestyle than they've got on benefits. That's not right. It's not fair, and we need to absolutely correct.
Just to be clear, because the chat's talking about it, I'm not in favour of taking people's homes off them. I'm in favour of taxing second homes, taxing third homes more, taxing fourth homes more. You might eventually get to the point where you tax very, very highly. With large estates, though, that have been inherited, like the Duke of Westminster's, we need some serious policy there, because you can't have one individual owning half of London, which is, essentially what you've got in the current situation. The other thing I would say, whilst we're talking about inequalities of land ownership in this country, is that the monarchy and the aristocracy should be abolished, and certainly the monarch's lands should be taken back into state control without compensation. So I am in favour of some quite radical things. The monarchy is a huge problem, actually, distributionally, because the monarch controls a lot of land, including whole duchies.
Woman there in the stripy top and glasses.
Hi. My question would be, when we talk about the welfare and the spend, in the last financial year, 48% of our spend was actually on...
I want to tax... Look, I hate to keep going back to the chat. There's just this one person that I'm finding reasonably annoying. I want to tax second homes because the purpose... The function of the state is to set out the rules of our society, to create a set of structures that people can live within. And the purpose of housing is that people can live in housing. That's it. It's not an asset, and it shouldn't be an asset, because we know that once housing becomes an asset, it starts to become a much bigger problem in our society. It creates this rentier class that I've talked about. So I just think you're thinking about housing in a very strange way. It does happen to be the case that we think about housing in an odd way in this country, that we think about it as an asset that should rise in value, a lot, that essentially you should buy a house and then that you should be entitled to loads and loads and loads of unearned income generated by the increase in value of your property. But that's a mad way of thinking about housing. A house is somewhere to live, fundamentally. And I guess my view of politics is that we should start from what people need, and then we should look at our society and say, well, is that what our society is producing? And look, housing has become a huge problem because the financialization of housing in the 1980s in particular, the removal of rent controls, the creation of buy-to-let mortgages, the constant stoking up of demand in the housing market by Conservative politicians, all of these things have created this big asset bubble, and it's nobody's fault that they have become part of the rentier class, that they own several homes, but it's the fundamental point, quite basic point really, is it's not good for society, and we need to find a way of going back in time and turning the housing market back into what it was, which is lots of council housing, and then people owning properties where they lived, and I think we need to shift our thinking and stop seeing landlords as these sort of decent people who just happen to own homes. There's lots of culture around this, right? That you can generate a passive income, as if passive income is this sort of inconsequential, totally sort of moral thing. Passive income, another way of describing passive income is unearned income, that you're sitting on an asset In the case of housing, it's a very direct relationship. What you are doing is you're sitting on that asset and demanding payment from working people. We need to have a society that is balanced so that working people who go out and work hard for their money, that they are the ones that are prioritised in society and not the rentier class who simply sit on assets and earn an income from them. So that's all I'm saying.
Pensions, and we're doing the triple lock, and every minister here is, every party is committing to that triple lock. How are we going to afford that moving forward? Are we going to work longer and longer? Like, when are we going to make that question and go, is that sustainable?
And the final thing, right? Part of the reason this narrative survives is exactly what you said, right? Hard-working people investing in assets. It's not hard-working people, generally speaking, who are buying up assets. It's already wealthy people who make more money from the way that capitalism works, right? So I think it's something like 30% of the wealth in this country could be traced back to the Norman Conquest. So generally what happens is once you've made money and you can continue to pass that down, and the fundamental rule of capitalism is that if you have money, you can easily turn that money into more money by buying assets. And what I'm saying is that we need to rebalance our society away from that kind of wealth creation and towards productive wealth creation, which you get from people starting businesses, yes, and making money that way. I think the left should be sort of pro-business in the sense that it generates jobs and it generates growth, but certainly a society that is rewarding people for working within our economy. That's the sort of primary person that we should have in mind when we think about politics. Hard-working people who go to work every day because they have to in order to live. And you think it's not sustainable?
No,
by the sound of it.
no. Okay, man in the stripy t-shirt and glasses. Yeah.
Oh, hi. My biggest problem with this is there is a massive stigma attached to when it comes to claiming benefits, even when it's for the right reasons. So I think that if we can work to help people if we can overcome that stigma, then I think that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine if the energy that went into defending rich people went into defending people on benefits. Imagine how much different our society should be. This is what's so exhausting about having these sorts of conversations. As soon as you start saying, as somebody on the left, let's tax the rich, you get all of these people who are not that rich themselves leaping to the defence of these sort of often hypothetical rich people. What about hardworking people who've just happened to have owned several homes? Look, there's some low-hanging fruit here, right? When we talk about taxing wealthy people, there are billionaires that exist in our society. Can we tax them? Is that all right? Can we tax them a lot? Might it be quite good for society if billionaires didn't exist and we could use some of that money towards building hospitals, building schools, building social housing? Well, these things are possible because politics can make them possible.
Start to help people get on the right benefits that they need, and that we can start to get things moving again in the direction that the country needs.
So government spending on health and disability benefits at the moment is set to increase to nearly 100 billion by the end of the Parliament, and that's bigger than the entire education budget, for example. So do you think the welfare bill should be cut, or would you rather
honestly think that it might need refocusing, but I definitely don't think it should be cut.
Who's laughing at that? Let's hear what you think, sir. I heard a kind of sort of yes. Yes.
I'm not trying to stigmatise anybody that struggles with mental health issues and struggles to find their place, whether it's in the workplace or in the world in general. But sadly, there is too much going out and not enough coming in, and there are some hard choices that need to be made. And I just think people need to be given the correct tools to know that they have options beyond, for example, being on long-term benefits. I think it's enabling people to make a productive and fulfilling, role in society.
Well, Emma's question was, who will be brave enough to sort it out? Do you think any of the parties you see here have got the answer?
I seem to get the impression from programmes like this and also TV in general, that parties seem to focus on fighting against each other and polarised opinions and bickering.
It's standard BBC Question Time, this, by the way, isn't it? So we started with blaming immigrants, and now we're blaming poor people.
Rather than...
It's why I don't watch it anymore. I've only watched it because Zack's on.
Actually dealing with the main issues that people are worried about today.
OK. Annabelle, will be brave enough to sort out the welfare system as a safety net and not a lifestyle choice?
I'm not convinced that any politician of any stripe is willing to actually tell the public what is required in order...
Can somebody just look up Annabelle Denham and tell me what sort of school did she go to? Because I bet Annabelle Denham went to a private school. I bet she's from a very wealthy background. And she's about to say things and speak about things of which she cannot possibly have any knowledge.
To have a very necessary retrenchment of state expenditure. We simply cannot be in a situation where we are spending this year £315 billion on welfare. Around £70 billion of that is going on the state pension. And yes, we do need to look at the triple lock and reducing it to a double lock, which would be linked to inflation and to earnings. And we must look at out-of-work
Wow.
benefits.
She must be one of the only journalists for the Daily Telegraph who went to a state school.
Politicians talk a very good
I apologise.
talk about the welfare state and fairness and how it must pay to work, and yet they've created a system where the incentives are often for people to do the exact opposite. It is grotesquely unfair that you have examples of households who are on benefits bringing in more money than households where two adults are on the national minimum wage. That can't...
Right, and yet the standard line from the Telegraph is anti-union, anti-strike. Part of the reason why wages have not kept up with productivity growth, not just in this country but elsewhere, is because unions have not been strong enough because they were disempowered in the 1980s. So if you want to have workers taking more of the proceeds of the productivity growth that we've seen in our society, which has stalled since austerity, unfortunately, then you're going to need to give working people more power to take more of that, or the alternative is that you empower the state to redistribute more of that wealth.
Possibly be right, and yet, as we saw with the welfare row before the summer, Labour is simply not going to be able to take a scythe to our bloated welfare budget. The Tories presided over an enormous increase in welfare spending, and you just wonder where on earth the money is going to come from, because the tax burden is already at a post-war high. We've got over 50% of the population who are now net recipients of the state, and that just keeps ticking up and up and up and up. Who ultimately is going to be footing the bill? Because we've got a shrinking number of taxpayers at the moment. So currently, as I say, I don't think that any politician is really willing to come out and tell some genuinely hard truths. But perhaps at some point in the coming years, they won't have any choice.
But what is the solution to this, right? If you've got an ageing population and you also want to kick out loads of foreigners, which is what the Reform Party platform appears to be. The Tory platform is to restrict immigration. So where are these workers coming from who are going to be paying the taxes in this society of yours? That's a little bit lost on me, and I'm a little bit concerned about it actually, because I'm 40, so I'm going to be hitting my retirement at exactly the point where this becomes a big problem.
So. The Green Party want to increase health and disability spending along with abolishing the two-child benefit cap. So you don't want to see it come down, you want to see it get bigger.
Maybe I could make some money out of this YouTube channel in my retirement. Unfortunately, last time I did a live stream, I think I earned £2.50. So I'm not getting paid the minimum wage for this broadcast.
Yeah, Emma, so I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. The 4 wealthiest people in this country have more wealth than 20 million people. Inequality in our society is absolutely huge. In fact, there will be people who go to sleep tonight who can make more money than any of us could earn in an entire year. And many of you will have seen my party political broadcast that 10 million people have seen. And ultimately, what I'm saying in that broadcast is we need to be taxing the super rich, not plumbers, not hairdressers, not people who are trying to just earn a living and get by, but people who have huge, inordinate amounts of wealth. So when it comes to telling the truth and when it comes to hard choices, why is it always hard choices for our working class communities, for people living in poverty, for people who are working really hard but not being paid enough by a corporate company that they're having to take benefits despite the fact they're working? And why are these not tricky choices for multimillionaires and billionaires? We need to tax wealth and not work. It is time for a tax on the super rich.
Okay.
Here. And look, you could, if you were willing to go really bold on this, and you know, I kind of am actually. You know, if you imagine that we let the billionaires keep, like, let's just say we let them keep 10 million, which is enough to live on, right? And then we take the rest. How much money would that be? It'd be astronomical sums, right? So, like, what's being proposed by left-wing parties is to really take very, very little, so little that they wouldn't even notice us taking it. This is why I kind of don't buy the line that the rich would leave, because a 1% wealth tax, for example, for the people who are as wealthy as we're saying, it's really not that much. And further to that, as I was saying earlier, if they do want to leave, what are they contributing to our society anyway, other than living as a rentier class off the work of other people?
Can I just ask, what do you think that the individuals who you would like to tax will do in response to some sort of measure like this? We're talking
And you can write the script, can't you?
about people who are international, who are highly mobile, and who will not hesitate to move to another jurisdiction if the tax regime here becomes...
I mean, an exit tax is one idea, right? So you could say that you're only allowed to take a certain amount of money out of the country, and then you just tax them for taking their money out.
Too unfavourable.
Good question, Annabelle. Thank you. So we're talking about assets,
welcome.
so it's very difficult. Glad we're being so polite. It's good that we're not. You can't move an asset. So, for instance, the Duke of Westminster owns half of Mayfair. He can't just pick up Mayfair and leave. But also, I think we should be more patriotic about that than our country. I think people want to live and work and earn money in this country on their assets because...
I feel like Zack might have been watching my YouTube channel with that Duke of Westminster thing. I always bring up the Duke of Westminster.
They love this country because they love our communities and the integration we were talking about. I don't think it should be some kind of corporate sink for people just to have wealth and own assets, which then if they don't want to pay into our NHS or don't want to pay into our education or invest in our communities, they say, oh, I'm going to leave. If that's the case, then I think we should be prouder of our country and wave them out the door. There's literally no evidence that a wealth tax would actually make people go. It's just something that's often propagated by high net worth individuals, because you can imagine why they might want us to think they're going to leave, because actually they don't want to pay 1%, 2% on their assets. I'm talking about 1% on £10 million or more, or 2% on £1 billion or more, which could raise between 15 and 25 billion pounds that would drastically reduce inequality. Our communities are crying out for this.
Zia, so let's get, by all means you comment on that. But
yeah, I mean, the other solution is a one-off wealth tax set at a much higher rate. So in order to do this, you'd need to take them by surprise. So it's quite difficult to get democratic consent for it. But you could be quite vague in a manifesto and say that you're going to introduce some kind of wealth tax, and then come the budget, you could say, and actually it's going to be a one-off tax and we're going to set it at a very high level. That's another way of doing it. Then you don't need to worry about exit taxes. And it also makes it administratively easier to do, because there are all sorts of objections to wealth taxes around, well, how do you go about valuing illiquid assets, paintings, bottles of wine, whatever. But you could say, right, well, what we're actually going to have is a 10% wealth tax for assets over 10 million and a 25% wealth tax for assets over $1 billion. It's going to be a one-off tax, and there we go, you're going to have to pay it. Now, that would raise hundreds of billions of pounds at a stroke that you can invest in totally transforming our society. And those figures sound high, right? 25%. But 25% for a billionaire is still going to leave them with billions of pounds.
Get to the question. Back to the question. The welfare system should be a safety net, not a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, well, look, reform are very clear. We are on the side of people who set their alarm clocks before they go to bed and wake up early in the morning and go to work. And we speak to so many of
No, you're not on their side.
these people across the country, regardless. You know, people earning close to minimum wage, all the way through to people earning hundreds of thousands of pounds a year, who say to...
I mean, this guy is literally a millionaire, right? So I can't do anything other than laugh at this idea that former investment banker and millionaire Nigel Farage and millionaire business owner Zia Youssef, that they're on the side of working people. It is bollocks. It is bollocks. They are hardcore Thatcherites. I think in the case of Farage, actually, he's more extreme than that. I think he takes inspiration from, the name is escaping me, Enoch Powell. I think he's a Powellite. There was once a point in Nigel Farage's career, actually, where he wrote to Enoch Powell. I think it was when he first stood for Parliament, asking Enoch Powell, when he was still alive, to support his campaign. His politics are much more Powellite than they are Thatcherite. As you can see from the immigration stance, Thatcher would never have gone as far as Reform UK have done on immigration, and indeed Thatcher wouldn't have gone anywhere near to where the current Conservative Party are going by threatening to rip up Winston Churchill's legacy by pulling us out of the ECHR, because Thatcher had an understanding of history. She was born in a generation that still had enough memory of the war, and she used to talk about Winston. She'd have respected the post-war settlement more than that. She didn't respect much else about the post-war settlement, but I think certainly the ECHR should never have gone that far. But anyway, the point I'm making is this is a millionaire in a party run by a millionaire claiming to be on the side of working people. We should not buy it for a second.
Us, why do I bother? As has already been made, the point has already been made, there are many households in this country who literally take in more money not working than households who work. There's nothing about that.
And how much money do you make on the assets that you own by doing nothing? And where does that money come from? This is the thing, because even if you earn money from owning stocks and shares in the UK stock market, you're earning money from the profits of companies that could have gone in people's pay packets, right? If the balance of power between workers and capitalists was more tilted in the favour of workers, then people who are just millionaires and just sit on assets would have less money. Because there is a fundamental oppositional relationship between millionaires and billionaires and working people. There just is. We're not on the same side. So when you get a millionaire or a billionaire telling you to vote a certain way in politics, you should never believe them. They're not on our side. They've got a totally different set of class interests.
That's remotely acceptable. And I'm sorry, Zack, we live in the real world. The British people I agree with you, there are so many people in this country who have real problems. But the only way we're going to solve those problems is understanding how the world actually works. We don't live in a world where, the fantasy world, where we can grow the size of women's breasts by hypnotising them. And the notion that a wealth tax, there's no evidence a wealth tax doesn't work. France
lecturing us about poverty.
Yeah.
Hang on.
That's the reform art.
France. I'm a multi-millionaire who started with nothing and created hundreds of jobs, and I'm proud of that. And yes, I had luck. And here's my luck. You know the luck I had? Being born in the United Kingdom, an amazing, loving, welcoming country. They welcome my parents here, and by the way, has social mobility. One of the reasons I'm in politics is because I am so concerned that social mobility is on the wane, and there are so many young people in this country lacking opportunity. One of the problems that we have right now is that we have the welfare state is a runaway train that is dragging this country to bankruptcy.
So
many
what would you do about it here? What is reform?
So here's the first thing we would
policy,
do. One in six, and I appreciate some of the audience here won't like it, but here is a fact. 1 in 6 recipients of universal credit alone are foreign citizens. And I'm afraid British taxpayers should not have to fund a food bank for the world. So we will make British welfare only available to citizens of the United Kingdom. That's the first thing.
What about British citizens British citizens? What would you want to do about the welfare bill?
Well, so that's the first significant saving we can make. The second thing we need to do, we absolutely need to materially increase the number of in-person assessments. I mean, a vast percentage of the new cars sold in this country every year are through the Motability scheme. And if you look at how many young people, probably the biggest tragedy right now that no one is talking about in this country is I think it's about a quarter of our young adults are signing on to welfare, and all of the evidence suggests that once they do that at such a young age, they never come off. We have to make work pay. One of the craziest things about politics in this country that nobody, the Tories over 14 years and Labour seem to want to do nothing about is the fact that if you are on benefits in this country and you say, you know what, I actually want to start working again, I want to start working again, whether you're young or old, you pay a marginal tax rate of north of 100% when you start working more than 16 hours a week. You literally have less money in your bank account. If you're on benefits,
Okay, can we just be clear, though?
And so let's fix those
let's just be clear, though. I mean, you've talked about stopping universal credit for migrants in this country.
All forms of welfare, yeah.
What about welfare for people who are not migrants? As I understand it, I think, because either you have told me or Nigel Farage has told me, Reform wants to make significant cuts to the welfare bill for British people.
Fiona, we have no choice. Otherwise, the country is going to go bankrupt several times over. The cost of borrowing for the United Kingdom on a 30-year basis in the bond market is at multi-decade highs. And I will say this.
The UK can't go bankrupt. We're a sovereign currency issuer, so this is bollocks.
There are many people, young and old in this country, who do need help from the state, who do need our welfare system to support them, and quite rightly too. And nobody will suffer more than them if we fail to make difficult choices to make sure that people who can work go to work and that work is rewarded. And that's what a reform government will do.
This is so much noise from you. I wish I'd see a detailed plan. It's pure populism without a detailed plan. That is not credible. Actually, we've got two parties here that just
well, you ballooned the size of the welfare state. You took steps...
Okay, let him make a point.
You've just made that comment, and then Nigel Farage has come out and said that he actually wants to get rid of the two-child benefit cap. Choose someone.
For
Stop
British
trying.
people in work.
Stop trying to say everything to everybody.
I think this illustrates why politics is going to change, right? That over the next year or so. The real political debate is between Reform and Green on this panel, isn't it? And then you've got kind of centrist slop in the middle. Now that could produce a new politics, couldn't it? It could produce a new politics where the Green Party become the party of the left and Reform become the party of the right, and that seems to be the direction of travel in the polls. I think I might be being a bit optimistic about the Green Party, but it just feels like we've got two dying parties at the moment, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. And I've got to say, as far as I'm concerned, it's about time they both died.
It's not credible. Are you big government or are you low tax? You can't be both.
We want to scrap the two-child benefit cap.
Stick to that position.
We want to scrap the two-child benefit cap.
You want to do everything, Zia, and of course you do.
That's what we want to do.
I get it, because, you know, it's really popular. But that's not government. You need to be responsible.
Are you proud of your record with regards to the welfare
state? Your last manifesto had 140...
Hang on, wait.
Your last manifesto...
Let Nigel talk, then you can come back.
Your last manifesto had £140 billion of unfunded tax and spending commitments. Let me be very clear. We made mistakes when we were in government. Kemi outlined in her speech this week how we're going to go back to proper Conservative values and principles. Personal responsibility, low tax, small government, living within your means, so that then we can have a vibrant economy that generates the taxes to pay for the public services.
It's really important to understand, right, that Thatcherism is basically a delusion on the right. So the only reason Thatcherism worked the first time around is because there was loads of assets that the British state had at its disposal that Thatcher could sell off. So she sold off all the nationalised industries. She had North Sea oil bonanza when that money started coming in. She sold off all the council housing, and she was able to use that one-off dividend to pay for tax cuts. The size of the state actually didn't decrease under Thatcher, leaving aside the privatisations. It actually stayed roughly the same. So this is all a delusion. It only worked in the 1980s because you had this one-off sell-off that was possible then and is not possible now because the British state doesn't own anything anymore. We had that car boot sale in the 1980s. It was incredibly destructive. It's had a really negative effect on all of our lives because we don't have council housing anymore, for example. We sold off natural monopolies like water and energy and the railways. Absolute stupidity. The railways was major, actually. But you can't do it again. It was a one-off trick, right? And the Conservative Party have been trying to play that one-off trick forever, right? Since then. It doesn't work. We saw how damaging austerity was when they tried to do it, when they were forced to do it. And again, that is something which is still causing problems today. The fact that instead of investing when we needed to invest, when interest rates were rock bottom after the financial crisis, when we needed to invest, the Tory party cut.
You are going around, as are you, promising absolutely everything to everybody. It's really nice to hear, but you need to be an alternative government. You need a team around you who can deliver. And saying populist stuff just because people like to hear it, that is not credible. I need to get them out.
Let's talk about living within our means. Let's talk about living.
You have to be quick, Zack, because we're almost out of time.
Very quickly. Let's talk about living within our means. The Tory government in their 14 years ran a deficit in every single one of those 14 years, despite almost every single Tory chancellor promised to stop it. And you tripled the national debt and took the tax burden on British people to the highest level since World War II and made everyone's lives worse in the process. And that is why the Tory party is dead.
We're out of time. There's a man up there waving his hand desperately.
Oh my God! Thank God for that. Thank God for that. Let me switch away from this. There we go. I don't think I'll remain online for much longer after this. It's traumatic. Watching BBC Question Time. It's been nice to spend some time with you guys. I know I've ignored the comments a little bit because this thing should be... Hang on. This thing should be updating. And it seems to be... Well, it's broken for me anyway. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did and you're not subscribed, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. If you really enjoyed it, maybe give me a bit of money. Because, last time I streamed I made £2.50. There we go. But I'm going to end the stream now, I think, in the usual way. Goodbye.